Hello and welcome back to Art Masters with me, Mrs. Portilla. Today we're going to be doing some Parisian posters, just like Henri Toulouse Lautrec. We're going to be using some washes of color and some black crayon to make some exciting lines for our posters. We're going to be doing some characters from Paris, just like Lautrec did, and we're going to try to make our posters just like his. So if you're ready, let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so once we have our paper, the first thing we're going to do is we are going to put our name on and glue our Lautrec tag on the back, because once we start painting, our papers are going to get wet. So to get started on our Lautrec poster, we're going to use some reference pictures. There will be a bunch of examples you guys may do. I'm going to do an example of this Jane Avril one, and I'll be doing an example of this Ambassadeurs one, which will be landscape. You don't have to copy me. I'm just going to be giving you guys some tips that will apply to all the posters. So let's all get set up with our manila paper, a pencil, a crayon, and our reference photo that we're going to draw from. So first I'm going to do the quick sketch of the Jane Avril poster. And when I look at this poster, I see that it takes up almost this entire poster, and I'm looking for basic shapes. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of draw this curve of the entire figure. So I'm going to start at this corner, go all the way down to maybe like the middle of her dress. So now I'm going to draw the head and the hat, which is basically a big oval, and it's up towards the upper left of my paper. So I'm going to draw, I'm holding my pencil lightly, kind of trying to get the shape and size of it. So now I have that circle. Now I see her arms. It's kind of a diagonal line with two lines coming out. This arm, I can even lay my pencil over it, you could see where it's pointing. It's pointing back to that over there. Okay, now I want to just get the basic shape of this dress, which kind of looks like a big triangle here and another triangle here. Looking kind of how much space where her dress stops. Right about there. So now I have a basic sketch just with kind of the basic shapes of the Jane Avril poster. This one I think is a little bit simpler, and I'm going to start with his head and the hat, making that one shape. So I'm looking in the middle of my paper, and I see most of his head is on that side. So I'm going to go about to the middle, and then I'm going to draw a giant hat head circle. And then I'm going to just add these little kind of body lines. So let's get started with our pencil, doing simple basic shapes for our sketch. I'm going to make his hat look a bit more like a hat. So now I'm going to be using a little bit darker pencil. I am going to go over this in crayon. So I'm going to still kind of look at these basic shapes, but now I'm being a little more particular about what I'm drawing. And then I'm going to do his head shape within the hat, kind of looking at his face, and then just doing this scarf that cuts across his face. So Jane Avril, again, I'm going to do the same thing where I'm going to start with her hat. And I'm using my circle as a guide. And then I'm going to kind of put her face with the hair. Okay, so let's add a little bit more detail. And I didn't erase any of my lines. I just went right over them with a darker line. And then we're going to go over it with crayon. So don't worry. Okay, so now we kind of have their shape of their head and their hat worked out. So I am going to look at his clothing and I'm gonna add to my scarf. Looking at the placement, I can always use my pencil to see where the middle is and where these objects align. I see another little line here. And then I'm gonna add his hairline. So this black area, that's his hair. The girl poster. Let's make her arms and her dress a little bit more three-dimensional. So her hand, you could just do an oval for her hand for now. Looking at our reference picture, okay, so let's go ahead and add a little bit more detail, giving our Jane Avril more of a body, not just sticks, and giving our ambassador his scarf and his hair. Okay, so now I'm going to add his face. I'm just gonna keep it very simple. If I line up where his ear and his nose are about in the same line, kind of by his cheek. So for his nose, I'm just gonna draw a line, and then I'm gonna kind of do this little M shape like this, okay, and curve it up. At the top of the line, I'm now gonna do an eyebrow, which is just a curve. And then over here, you'll notice it's a big, longer eyebrow. Now I'm just gonna add a small circle for the eye, and then let's give him a little bit of a mouth. His mouth is kind of a grimace, squiggly lines. For Jane Avril, we're going to do her face, and we're gonna do the same thing. I'm putting my pencil where her eyes are. Do you see that they're at a diagonal line? So I'm gonna do a small dot, and then I'm just gonna put a line over the top. Her nose is a nice little curve like this. And then she just has two little dots for nostrils. Her mouth is almost a diamond shape, line through it. So there's a very simplified. So go ahead and let's just add a simple face for now. And we can add more detail if you would like. Okay, let's do some of our final sketching details. He has stuff in the foreground, which is him, and the background. He has like the little silhouette that we saw in some of Lautrec's work. And he even has the letters, which we could do with crayon after. But I'm just gonna draw a straight line. And then I'm gonna draw the 3 circles. And then I'm just gonna draw a quick basic shape. Okay, so now I kind of have something in the background, and I will work on the letters later. For Jane Avril, let's make her dress and her hands work. So she has this feathery fluff off her hat, which is just kind of a loose shape. She also has a feathery fluff here, which conveniently can hide her hand for those of us who don't love drawing hands because they're hard. Now we're gonna add the snake to the dress. Start with the circular head, and then I'm just gonna follow the shape that I see on my page. Then I'm gonna add just this little wavy line here. You could add the final details to her dress. We're not getting overly detailed. These were very simplified for posters. You could do the background silhouette and the snake on her dress and the feathers on her hat. Okay, great. Now we're going to move on to line. Lautrec used very unique and interesting lines. Some were thick, some were thin, some were wavy, some had a lot of action and movement. So we're going to use our crayon to do the same. I'm going to hold my crayon. I'm going to kind of hold it like a brush at the moment. I'm going to practice pushing hard and pulling the crayon. And you see I get a nice thick stroke. Now I'm gonna hold tightly and I'm gonna barely push and I'm gonna get a thin, lighter line. What happens if I do both? So now I'm getting a thick and a thin line in my wavy line. So we're gonna try to vary our line as we're going over our sketch. So don't worry about erasing. So now what we're gonna do is we're gonna go over our painting, our poster, with our black crayon, thinking about pushing hard and changing the weight of our line. So now we have our sketch. If you would like, you could erase some of these lines. I don't know. All right, so now the fun part. We are going to paint. Lautrec did lithograph. So the more colors he had, the more plates he had to use. So today we're gonna be working with 3 colors, black, yellow, and red. And I have given you 2 brushes. We can use our bigger brush for the bigger washes, and we could use our more pointy, smaller brush for any of our smaller detailed areas. So we're gonna get a dot of red, black, and yellow, and our little water. So the first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna do a wash. So we're gonna keep some of our manila paper background, okay? So I am going to first start with my brush in my water, and I stick that in the water, and then I can just dab it on the sides or off here. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna do a wash over the largest part, which is gonna be his, you guys notice I just have water on my brush, no paint. So what I'm doing is I'm getting my surface wet, so my paint will be more like watercolor when I put it on there. Now we're going to use our wash. So I'm literally dabbing a tiny, tiny bit, putting it on my palette, dipping it back in water, and adding more water. I'm making a very thin watercolor wash, not painting straight on. So now I'm gonna go right over my wet area with the same type of big strokes. The more water you use, the thinner and lighter the color will be. Okay, so no matter which drawing you're doing, you're gonna go ahead and you're gonna use your big brush. You're gonna dip it in the water. You're gonna paint that biggest area with a wet color. You see I avoided the scarf because I'm gonna put a different color there. And you're gonna do a wash, a little bit of paint with a lot of water. Great, so we should all have at least one area with our wash. I am not cleaning my water at all. When you have dirty water, it actually kind of dulls the brightness of the color. So we're gonna keep our dirty water. I am now going to pick another area. I'm gonna do the snake. For this one, I am going to switch brushes. I'm gonna use my smaller brush. You have a choice, whichever one you want. You're gonna dip your smaller brush if you choose. And we use our fingers to make it a nice point, just like that. And again, same thing. I'm gonna go over with water, doesn't have to be perfect. I hold the brush with my finger, my pointer and my thumb. Okay, now I'm gonna use a little bit of yellow, a bit of water, and then I'm gonna pull the brush. So now you're gonna pick a second area and you're gonna do the same method. You're gonna put a little bit of water on, and then you're gonna add a dab of color with more water. So go ahead. Okay, great. So we should have 2 areas painted. So for this scarf, I decided I wanted to use the bigger brush. It's your choice, whichever one you prefer. I wanted it a little brighter. So now I'm just doing paint and water without painting just plain water on first, which is gonna give me a little bit of a brighter color. It's still very thin and watery, but it's gonna be a little bit brighter. So we're gonna continue on with our wash, and you could decide if you wanna do it a little bit brighter by using just a little bit more paint with a little less water. And we're gonna continue doing a couple more shapes, and then we will do the face together. So let's do. So let me show you how I'm gonna do the face, and I'm gonna show you an option. So this is optional. If we want to add some more crayon resist, I am going to take the red crayon, and I'm just gonna add that to her lips to make it very bright. And in some of his paintings on the slides, we saw that he had like a Japanese influence, and he kept the face white. So I'm going to use my white crayon to color in. Okay, let's say you don't want that option. I'm gonna show you how to do some flesh, and I might clean my brush off in my water. Here's part of the reason I like dirty water. I could take this dirty water and actually just use this to color my flesh because it actually has a little bit of tint to it. So you're welcome to just use your dirty water as a wash for the flesh, or you could use a white crayon or the red crayon for the lips. That's very minimal. We're not using that in a lot of places. Very nice. So once you have the flesh, you still might have some background elements. So if you're doing this guy, we have our little silhouette. I'm gonna paint this very light because it's a background. So your flesh, a little bit of the background, but notice I'm not painting the actual background. I'm leaving that just showing the manila paper. This would just be if you added this little silhouette. So finish up with your washes, and if you want to add the letters, go ahead and use your crayon. All right, so you should have the letters if you want. Pretty much everything filled in. Any last final details? And we'll help clean up when we're all finished. And great job with your Lautrec posters. All right, great job today, guys, with your posters. I hope you're happy with the way that they came out. If you have time, or when the posters are all hung up, you guys can evaluate each other's work using positive comments about the quality of line, maybe the different washes of color or composition, or maybe you did some background silhouettes or perspective like Lautrec. So I hope you enjoyed doing your posters by Lautrec, and we'll see you next time at Art Masters.